Hello, welcome to CS101, Introduction to Computer Science. This is class 6 and it's programming in Java. So Java is an extremely popular language in the computer science industry. It's used heavily by big corporations and medium-sized companies as well, mostly because it's a safe choice and it's performant. So code that you write in Java is actually pretty performant. It's been tuned over the years, so it does very well in performance and it's safe. But a lot of companies, especially startups and small companies and maybe even medium-sized companies, don't use Java. Rather, they might be using languages like PHP or Python or Ruby, etc. And the reason for this is there's a whole bunch of advantages to other languages. They're much more compact than Java. It's easier to code in, easier to express yourself, and easier to run applications in those other languages. For example, Facebook was written in PHP originally and still mostly run in PHP. So the takeaway from this, like this short anecdote, is that the programming language, at least from my personal opinion, is that the programming language isn't that important as long as you can get work done. There's a whole bunch of companies that do work in different programming languages, and you often hear software engineers argue about which programming language is better, but it doesn't matter as long as you can get the job done. And for this class, we will use Java to introduce some basic programming constructs and syntax. In a future class, we will look at other programming languages briefly as well, but we'll introduce some basic programming concepts in Java. So the first concept in programming languages are statements. So think of statements as commands to a computer, like do this or do that. So in the computer language, you would say do this, or do that. You notice the brackets and quotes and semicolons. The circular brackets are often used for functions. And for example, if you wanted to print something in Java, you would say system.out.println and hello world. So there's brackets and the hello world is in quotes. It's basically telling the computer to print the string hello world. So these are statements. So in statements, you're telling a computer to do something. And statements can be powerful. They can do a whole bunch of things. So let's say you want to make decisions. You use an if statement. So if time to wake up greater than 7, call the function wake up. That's basically what the statement here is expressing. You can repeat the same thing over and over again. So if you use a while loop, for example, while class not ended, call the function, try to pay attention. You notice the curly brackets, which is basically a code block. And what it's saying is while the variable class not ended, try to pay attention. You could use a for loop as well. That's just a different type of loop. And so you saw time to wake up and class not ended from the previous slide. These are called variables. So they're elements in the programming language that hold some data. In Java, they can be assigned like this. So you say int time to wake up is 8. The Boolean class not ended is a function call called lookup from desk. So int means an integer. It's a whole number. A Boolean is a type of variable that's only 2 values. It can be either true or false. So it's used to check for conditions. And variables can be assigned to a value, and that value can change over time. So variables are a bit different from constants. We won't talk about constants today, but the idea is that constants cannot change. So once you assign a value to a constant, you won't be able to change it. Whereas with variables, like you see here, you can change them whenever you need to. Functions. So functions, before I go into functions, Java also has math operators like the plus or minus for addition and subtraction, star for multiplication, slash for division. It has logical operators such as the AND, which is represented by a double ampersand, OR, which is represented by 2 pipes, and the NOT, which is represented by an exclamation mark. So these are often used, the logical operators are often used to group various conditions together and check for all of them or one of the many or not of a certain condition. A single equals, like you saw in the previous 2 slides, assigns a value to a variable. And if you want to check for equality, you can actually use a double equal to. So if you say if A double equals to B, then you're actually checking for equality. If you say A equals to B with a single equals, it assigns the value of B to A. But if you use double equals, if you say if A equal B, then you're checking for equality. And we saw the semicolon earlier, which ends a statement, the curly braces for a code block, and the circular braces for a smaller code block or a function call. So what are functions? Functions are a collection of statements that together perform useful functionality. The best thing about these is that they can be reused actually. So let's look at the try to pay attention function, right? So it could be a void. Void basically means that it doesn't return something, but a function can also return some variables like a boolean or an integer or strings and things like that. In this case, it doesn't actually return anything. So as you can see, it calls a function called check if awake and sets that to a boolean variable called am I awake. Then what we do is if not of am I awake. So if I am not awake, then if I am feeling bold, ask the professor if I can take a break, else pinch myself to stay awake. So there are two function calls, and which function gets called depends on the variable I am feeling bold or not. And those get called only if the am I awake variable is false or not true. And as you can see here, functions can call other functions. The real great thing about functions is that they help with maintaining code, right? Rather than building one giant code that runs linearly, you can break it up into different functions, and you can call functions from within other functions, and it helps really to maintain the code and with structured programming. Classes. So this goes into object-oriented programming, which is a style of programming that has been around for a few decades and has been widely acknowledged as a powerful paradigm. So functions are a collection of statements that together do something useful. Classes are a collection of variables and functions that together encompasses some common functionality, right? So let's say you're building a software to handle college courses. You want to describe a student and a teacher as a class. And by a class, I mean not as a course class, but rather as a programming language class. So the way you define it as in Java is you say class student, and you have a bunch of integers. So notice there's 4 lines, right? Int age, int year. Those are variables. Notice that those are variables. Then you have an int total grade. So actually I haven't defined, like there's nothing inside the function, but the expectation of this function is that it would return that student's total grade. It would return an integer with that student's total grade, and int grade for subject, and you're passing, so you notice the last line here, int grade for subject, string subject. So you're passing in a subject name as a parameter to this object, and it gets the grade for the subject. So that's what this function would do. So even though all of them return an int, the first 2 lines, age and year, are variables. The next 2 lines are total grade and grade for subject are functions, and they are all encompassed by this class student. So you can have many objects of the type student. So your programming language, the software that you're writing, would create many instances of this class student, many objects of this type student, which you would represent in the program. And how does a real Java program look? So here's a very simple hello world program in Java. So usually when you take programming language courses, they will, the first thing that comes out is a hello world program. And so here's your stock hello world program, public class hello world. So this is a class, public static void main, string args. So this is the entry point for any program in Java. So when you want to run a program in Java, it has to have this method function signature, which is public static void main, which takes in an array of strings as an argument. Don't worry about public static like void doesn't return anything. The square brackets are an array. We won't go into too much detail, but a method signature in Java, this is the entry point for a program, and all it does is system.out.println hello world. So it's simply printing hello world to your console. So you can actually, if you have a Java compiler, which I'll talk about in a second, you can actually type this program in, compile it, run it, and it'll print out hello world to your terminal. Here's a slightly more complicated program in Java. It's a guessing game, and it's from this website that is listed below. And the idea is the computer randomly selects a number and asks you to guess it. In fact, we'll see this guessing game again in the next class in Python. But it's actually a fairly simple piece of code. It's fully represented here. So you see it imports a random and scanner, which are 2 classes that are inbuilt into Java. Public class guessing game, it's that's the name of the class. Public static void main string args, this is the entry point for the program. And then so rand is the variable that's created using the Java util random class, and it creates a random variable. and the number to guess is an integer, which is an integer between 0 and 1000, which is what rand.nextInt returns. There's a variable initialized called number of tries to 0. We initialize something called input, which is a scanner that takes in user input. Initialize a variable called guess, which doesn't have any value, and set a boolean win, which is initially set to false. So while win is false, right? So that's the while loop there. It's going to keep repeating while win is false. And you're printing out a statement, system.out.println, guess the number between 1 and 1000. And then we say guess equal to input.nextInt. So that string guess a number has been output, and the program now takes in user input. So it's going to, when the user types in a number and hits enter, it's going to take that as an input, and then it'll increment the number of tries. So notice number of tries plus plus, which basically means number of tries equal to number of tries plus 1. It increments the value number of tries, and then it checks if the number that the user input guess is equals to the number to guess, the double equals, win is equal to true. So the user has won. Else, if now guess is less than the number to guess, it'll print out saying the guess is too low. If guess is greater than the number to guess, it'll say the guess is too high. And notice that it goes back to the while statement. So the loop keeps continuing until the user guesses the right number. Now, this is obviously guessing a number between 1 and 1000. If you had put rand.nextInt 100, it would just be a random number between 1 and 100. And it'll keep repeating it until the user wins. So win is true. And then it comes to the last three statements of the function, which is, system.out.println. You win, the number to guess was the number to guess, which the computer generated, and it took you the number of tries. So it's going to print out the number of times you actually try to guess the right number. So this is a full functional program in Java. You can actually go to this website, copy paste this program. In fact, the website includes complete details on how you would build a program like this, and you can again compile this in your Java compiler and run this on your terminal, and this will work. So in order to do this, you would need the Java development kit and an integrated development environment called Eclipse. You don't actually need Eclipse. Eclipse is optional, but you do need the Java development kit, the JDK. Both are free. You can actually download both of them for free, and you can download them from Oracle's website for Java and Eclipse for Java developers. So you can download both of these for free and get started. If you want to do more complicated programs, there's a whole bunch of courses out there in Java, about Java actually, that you can try out. So you can go ahead and try these simple programs or try something more complicated, and then we can move on to the next part, which is programming in Python.